We're going to watch Dr. Bethel make a very excellent point on the fare evasions, and he brings up a very good issue. I have a lot of problems with the fare evasions and the way they're being handled right now. The biggest problem I have is the amount of the fine. $175 for a $2.50 ride on a bus or a max is excessive. That is not a reasonable fine for somebody who's not paid a fare on the transit system. I never agreed with that when I was driving, and I think it's horrible the way that they do the fare evasions. I mean, they just march onto trains out of the blue. If they're going to do the fare missions, as far as I'm concerned, why don't they have them standing at the platforms right there, or as people get on, they can show the tickets. This kind of surprise spot fare things, I'm against those. They also sent in undercover cops to just pop out and go, surprise, fare mission. Completely ridiculous, a complete waste of time of undercover police who need to be doing real crime, not messing around with stupid fare evaders. I have a problem with people having to pay those kind of fines when everybody involved in the delivery of transit is making so much money. I mean, everybody. The operators are making money. The executives are making money. The only people that don't make out are the riders. And when they get caught with an expired fare or no fare, it's a $175 fine. Comes to find out, a lot of people don't even pay that fine. They show up, spend a half a day at court, and you can get it reduced to community service. So I have a lot of problems with the way they're enforcing the fares here. I think it's completely unjust, and I think it's wrong. I think it's just wrong. Most of the people that are riding transit are doing it because they don't have much of a choice. Even the choice riders that are riding transit don't really have a choice, I bet you. I mean, if you're going to downtown Portland and you live in Hillsborough, you really can't drive there because you can't get there. Highway 26 is this huge bottleneck going east. You can't get into the city. I mean, and there's no place to park in the city. So even the choice riders are not really choice riders because it's so difficult to get into the city from outside the city, and there's no place to park. Anyway, listen to Dr. Bethel, and then I'll make a few other remarks.
For this report, which is a good report. However, I do want to ask something in reference to a follow-up about where we're getting the most infractions of tickets not being validated and tickets being written of exclusions, which leaves the police or the transit officers the ability to either determine themselves on the spot whether I will issue or not issue a ticket. I would be interested in getting some data around how often that is happening, who's getting the tickets, who's not getting the tickets, the area in which it's happening, and I would hope that you would consider coordinating with transit as to where they're giving the infractions across the system, and then making that priority to look at the maintenance of the TVMs. What I'm hearing is that where there are those issues with the ticket vending machine, of course they're getting more and more infractions issued, and unfortunately what I'm hearing, it is happening in the areas where there are minorities mostly, and that gives me good concern of officers having that leeway themselves to determine whether I will or I will not, and most often in some of those cases my suspicions is that they're being issued, but in other areas they're not. I'm also hearing in other areas that there are times when the officers will only look and ask certain people and will pass over others and not ask them to produce a ticket or ballot form of travel. I would like to also, again, it's a transit issue, but it also has to do with whether those validators are working as well. So some coordinated effort between seeing what's happening with them and what's happening with where your machines are so that we can close that gap.
And I guess my first reaction would be we can absolutely do that. We certainly can look at by platform where the highest citations are and prioritize those platforms for addressing any maintenance issues. So yes, based on the data, we can match those up, and as we build our priority lists, which start in the morning and again in the afternoon with the shifts, we can prioritize that based on where those citations are issued.
Well, you know what Bethel is saying. He didn't say it, but you know what he was trying to say, right? He was saying, are you profiling minorities when you're checking fares? Who's getting off the tickets? Are they harder on minorities than they are on white people, for example? He didn't come right out and say it, but that's obviously what he was getting at. Who is actually being targeted? And you know, and I'm curious. I'm a little curious about how many minority fare inspectors do they have. I think I knew of only one when I was working there. Yeah, I'm curious about that. How many minority fare inspectors do they have? I think it's worth researching, and I think it's worth researching his point about, well, are more people getting tickets up in North Portland on the yellow line, and are those machines down the most? I think that's a very excellent question. I think it should be researched. I think we should know who's getting the tickets. We don't get a breakdown of who's getting these citations. All we know is thousands of people getting citations now. And, you know, in all the years I worked at TriMet, never had one fare dispute. Not one. You know, if people didn't have the fare, I was okay with it. You know, I understand, you know, that a lot of people aren't making any money. I don't know what people think, but there's a lot of people that don't actually have money out here. Sometimes people with money forget that there are a hell of a lot of people, hell of a lot more people without any money than the ones with money. So I was very lenient with that. I never had a problem. I never kicked anybody out for a fare. Never had one fare dispute. But then again, I never ever called the cops in my entire 15 years on the job. I tried to call the cops once for this Hispanic man that was drunk out of his mind and was standing right next to me, growling at me like a dog. And the dispatch didn't call me back. Okay, they just left me hanging there. And by the time I got downtown, he'd calmed down. That was the only time I actually tried to call the cops, but I never reached them. But I never actually called the cops in my 15 years. Never needed to. I never had any problems with passengers like that. But as far as the fares, I don't understand these drivers that make a big deal out of it. I just don't understand why you are so obsessed with getting that $2.50 out of these people. I mean, it's not going into your pocket. Okay, it's not coming out of your pocket. What are you so obsessed with that for? You make a whole big deal out of a fare evasion when they have a button right there for you to push. I mean, it's just not a big deal. And on 95% of operator assaults are over fares, by the way. So the next time you want to dick around somebody for a fare, remember that statistic. Well, one other thing I wanted to say. I just saw Dr. Bethel in the Joe Anybody YouTube video of Kendra James' 10th anniversary of being shot by the Portland police. And for a man who's so in tune with the minority issues in Portland, I'm just so surprised that he does not take a stronger advocacy role for some of the issues that are important to these people, like bus service, for example. You know, he's been passive throughout the whole light rail bus thing. You never hear him saying anything about that. And here's a man he's at the 10th anniversary of Kendra James, and apparently very plugged into the minority concerns, and yet he says nothing. He says nothing while he's been on the board. Oh, I don't remember him saying anything to preserve. Did he even say anything about the Woodlawn? I can't remember him doing anything about that even.